Hi, I'm Bill Babcock with Expert Amateur. It's kind of stormy here in Maui, so this makes it a particularly good, auspicious time to talk about lightning, although we're not having any here. My recent video about solar grounding and bonding, the title is Solar Grounding and Bonding Demystified. I don't think we really demystified it that much. It caused a bit of a stir. Will Prowse called it an excellent video. Actually, he called it awesome. But lots of other folks commented that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I understand it's a controversial issue. So, but I took all the comments to heart. I spent a ridiculous amount of time researching all of this. And so this video is everything I found out about the lightning lottery. The lightning lottery is about nearby strikes, and if you haven't properly grounded your system, then any of those nearby strikes can destroy your gear. And that's true no matter how many SPDs you hang off of it. SPD stands for Surge Protection Device, and counting on them to handle lightning-induced voltage is a bit of an overreach. Some SPDs do provide some valuable protection even against those very high, very sharp rise time voltages, but a lot of SPDs are basically worthless. And even the good ones are only as good as the available ground. And they need to be installed properly to really protect, and we'll cover that briefly at the end of this video. It could be worse. You could live in Central Africa. If you see any videos of people installing solar in Central Africa, you'll see some remarkable lightning rods being installed as well. Take a look at the global lightning map, and it's obvious why that's true. But this video is not about direct strikes, and it's not about bonding and grounding to manage system faults. It's about dealing with induced high voltage spikes caused by atmospheric phenomenon. And the best way to get rid of lightning-induced voltage is to return it directly to the source, the Earth, on the shortest path that doesn't include us, or our expensive equipment, or our home. It might seem counter to your mental image, but most strikes go from the earth to the clouds. And as every electrician will say, electricity must return to the source, and that means earth. And just because your state does well on the lightning lottery, on this heat map, doesn't mean that it's going to be good for you. For example, places like Colorado seem to be relatively inactive, but individual locations like Denver most assuredly are not. Here's the strike map for the Denver area. And note that while most of the state has a low density of strikes, there are even much smaller areas than Denver that have high activity. If you really want to know what your risk of damage is, you need to seek out some local information. My latest solar installation is in the relatively inactive Pacific Northwest. But I looked at my local activity and realized I needed to make my ground systems as robust as I can. So you can research all you like, but one close strike, no matter how unusual it might be, can still destroy everything you worked hard on and spent hard-earned cash to build. As controversial as lightning protection seems to be, there are a group of experts who agree completely about lightning protection. It's the engineers who deal with lightning almost daily, protecting radio gear connected to a tower that sticks up hundreds of feet in the air, or a transmission line that stretches for hundreds of miles. These people know how to absorb direct strikes and still operate without a glitch. The approach in the schematic above is the bare bones of how they do that. So engineers responsible for protecting equipment that's plagued by lightning use earth grounds far more elaborate than an 8-foot ground pounded in, an 8-foot rod pounded into the ground. But the underlying principle is exactly the same. If you'd like to see how extreme that gets, thumb through NFPA 780, the National Fire Protection Association code on lightning protection, and realize that what you see there is the required minimum. What actually gets done is even more elaborate. Incidentally, the usual recommendation for ground rods in dry soil is to use more of them. That can be ineffective. Ground rods are long so that they can penetrate below the permanent moisture level in the earth. And where there's a permanent moisture level, the resistance, the dirt resistance is a lot lower. And so inserting more rods that don't go deep enough may not help quite as much as you'd like. A longer rod might be in order. Measuring the resistance accurately is a fairly elaborate process called fall of potential, but you can get a rough idea by pounding in that second ground rod about 6 feet away and measuring the resistance with an ohm meter. More than 50 ohms is bad, anything less is better. Your local inspector may have a useful recommendation. The schematic here is from a video called How to Ensure Safe and Effective Solar Grounding from the University of Maryland's Extension Program. I'll put a link in the video description so you can watch it. It's the best information I've found in a video. And this is what the real experts agree is required to protect your gear from voltage spikes of all kinds. What you're seeing is, in this schematic, is local earth grounding, meaning grounding at the array, with grounding electrodes connected to the frames and mounting structure of the PV array with short straight runs of wire to connect the voltage induced in these structures from a nearby lightning strike straight to ground. And then, and very importantly, a bonding conductor attached to all the grounding electrodes undergrade. The frame and mounting structure ground is also connected to the system ground in the inverter, which provides a low resistance connection to the service entrance grounding electrode. The red arrows are SPDs that conduct line spikes to the system ground and from the system ground to the earth ground. Binding the earth ground to the service entrance ground might seem a little redundant. The system ground, called the ECG, provides a conductor path to the service ground, and you certainly can and should bind the system ground to the structure of the array. But the path is through your equipment and through your home. Code says it's okay, and many people believe you should just only do that. It might be adequate, it might. But that's a conductor relying on a chain of connections through existing wiring with multiple bends and kinks. It's just not the best practice for managing spikes that act like high frequency radio frequency. I just don't see why you'd want to be leading induced current from lightning, EMP pulses, solar flare spikes, or static into your equipment without a reliable parallel conductor, binding the ground rods together and keeping the spike voltage through the ECG at a minimum. The NEC codes go back and forth on this. The relevant code sections are 250, 104, 134, and 136. In the 2014 edition, editions come out every 3 years. The 2014 edition, which many jurisdictions use, says unattached structures must have their own earth ground. Later editions say they may have, but that's mostly because the requirements regarding lightning and static dissipation have been moved to the NFP 780. The 2020 version of 780 is about 110 pages long, but it is unbelievably dense, and I haven't found any useful way to separate out the requirements for solar installations. 780 covers every conceivable way to deal with direct and nearby lightning strikes, including the methods that are shown in this schematic, with local earth and service entrance grounds bound together below grade. So that leads me to the belt and suspenders conclusion that it's a good solution. No, it isn't a clear and explicit code requirement, but it's good insurance for your gear. It does add cost, but if you're already trenching to connect your equipment to the service entrance or to the main electrical panel, then it's just ground rods and some bare wire. In my case, it was around $200 to protect 10 grand worth of equipment. I also poured some bentonite clay on top of the ground rod bonding wire in the trench and soaked it with a hose before filling the trench. And that was two 50-pound bags of soil amendment. I don't remember what it cost, but it wasn't much. It's frankly a silly extreme, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where winter, spring, and fall are rainy, and I'm pretty sure that the moisture level underground is pretty far up. But if you live in a really dry location, it might be worthwhile. And like I say, if it was $50, I'd be surprised. Which brings us to how far is too far. A required minimum is a good approach for people establishing or teaching electric code, like the highly respected Mr. Mike Holt. How far should code insist that the installation go? There's always something more we could do to make things a bit safer. And there's always the danger that a code direction wouldn't be implemented properly and could wind up causing more problems than they fix. For example, having multiple earth grounds, having that be a requirement is really not that smart unless all those grounds are bound together. If they're not, an earth strike can create a potential between the grounds that flows dangerous and damaging current through the ECG. So trusting just the ground rod, just the ground path through the EGC might be adequate, and it might be a safer thing to require under code. But I'm not going to risk 10 grand worth of equipment when I could spend $200 more and avoid the risk entirely. I still plan to add SPDs. They're a good protection against voltage spikes on the incoming grid, regardless of its source. Those grid spikes can come from anything. Having a manufacturing facility someplace close to your house that turns on and off big machinery would cause substantial power spikes. But the performance of the SPDs and their effective life should be better and extended with this grounding approach. Most good SPDs use metal oxide varistors or gas discharge tubes, which work fast and well, and they reset themselves automatically. But they can degrade with each substantial power spike. They clamp and dissipate spikes to ground, but the bigger spikes damage the SPD. So having a good bonded ground system that prevents most of the big spikes saves your SPDs too. And this seems like a good time to talk about SPD installation, since we promised to. You need to install them just like you would install a conductor to an earth ground. That's because that's exactly what they really are. You need a short, straight run of wire, minimal bends, no service loops, no leaving excess wire so that you can mount them someplace else in the future. They need to be short, tight, direct. The SPD needs to be connected to a system ground that leads to a high-quality earth ground. If there isn't a direct path to earth ground, then the SPD, regardless of its quality, is almost worthless. I think if you look at this schematic a bit, you'll see that it's a safe approach, and it's a best practice for protecting your gear from induced spikes. So thank you for watching, and if this is the kind of technical content that you're interested in, please subscribe. I have more video plans in the queue, including one specifically on grounding and bonding that does not include all this lightning stuff. there are some issues regarding transformerless inverters that I think need to be addressed. I'm still researching the issue with some manufacturers. So until next time, stay safe and stay well grounded. Bye.